Imagine for a second you're out on a boat, late at night. Can you feel that wind? And the waves. Yeah, it's getting rough out there. You can hardly see through the spray. Now picture yourself as one of the disciples. They're in the middle of a storm that's so intense they're afraid for their lives. And that's where we're diving in today. We're going deep into the story of Jesus walking on water. We're using walking on water, a journey of faith, to help guide us today.
You know, this story, it's something that really sticks with you, especially when we get older. We start to see those storms in our own lives. But I think there's just something about this story that keeps drawing us back.
It really does. And the way the source talks about it, you really feel the fear the disciples must have felt. These were tough fishermen, guys who knew the sea. But even they were terrified. I mean, imagine that. You've spent your life on the water, and suddenly a storm comes along that makes you feel that small.
I think that's something a lot of us can relate to. No matter what age we are, life can throw those curveballs. Sometimes it feels like we're in a storm we just can't control.
The source actually talks about that, doesn't it? It's like these storms, they're not just about wind and waves, they're also about the struggles we have on the inside.
Yeah, it's true. And if you think about where the disciples were at in their journey with Jesus, they had seen some amazing things, but they were still trying to figure out who he really was. Their faith, it was still new, still being tested.
So the storm,
Yeah.
it's like a physical representation of what's going on inside them, the doubts they're having, the fears about what it means to follow Jesus.
Exactly. And then right in the middle of this chaos, they see a figure walking towards them on the water. The source talks about how terrified they were. Can you imagine seeing something like that? They thought it was a ghost. I mean, wouldn't you?
And then there's Peter, always the bold one. He shouts to Jesus, "Lord, if it's really you, tell me to come out to you on the water." What do you think was going through his head at that moment?
Well, the source suggests maybe Peter wanted to see this miracle for himself. Kind of like a kid. He wanted proof that this was real.
Like he was saying, if you can do it, I can do it too, right?
Right. But there's this other side to it too. Almost like he's challenging Jesus. A little bit of doubt mixed in with the excitement, like, prove it to me.
That's a good point. So even with all his boldness, Peter was still dealing with the same fear and uncertainty as the others. It's that back and forth, faith and doubt. It's a very human thing, isn't it?
And I think that's why this story, it stays with us,
Yeah.
especially after all these years. It reminds us that doubt, it's not the opposite of faith, it's part of it.
It's amazing, isn't it, how the source talks about this change in Peter. He starts out with all this faith, and then, well, things change, don't they? I mean, first he actually steps out of the boat, and for a little while, he's walking on water.
The source makes it sound incredible, like he's almost flying. You get this sense of pure joy, like he can't believe what he's doing.
It's like he's totally focused on Jesus.
Yeah.
And in that moment, anything is possible.
But then he takes his eyes off of Jesus.
And that's when the doubt comes in. He sees the wind, he sees those huge waves, and all of a sudden it hits him. The fear.
Yeah. Like everything comes rushing back. And it's probably even worse now because, well, he's standing on water.
It's like the thing that shouldn't be possible makes the fear even stronger.
Right. And this is where the source really connects this story to our lives. It's like when we just stare at the problem, like the wind and waves, we start to sink.
It's like that saying, keep your eyes on the prize. If we forget what we're aiming for, we get overwhelmed.
Especially, as we get older, we've been through a lot, right? We've seen loss, disappointment, maybe even some tough times with our health. It's easy to let those things take over.
But the source reminds us that even when we're doubting, even when it feels like we're sinking,
Yeah.
we're not alone. Peter cries out, "Lord, save me."
Mm.
And in Jesus, he's right there. He reaches out and pulls Peter up.
Instantly. There's no judgment there. It's all grace. Like God is always there, ready to help, even when our faith is shaky.
It's a really moving part of the story. It's like God doesn't expect us to be perfect, right? He knows we're human. We mess up. We doubt.
And it's interesting, isn't it? Even when Peter is doubting, Jesus still calls him, "You of little faith." It's not like a scolding. It's more like he sees that little bit of belief that's still there.
Like he's saying, I know you're struggling, but I'm here for you. That's got to be comforting, don't you think? Especially if you've ever questioned your faith, wondered if you're good enough.
Absolutely. The source makes it clear this isn't just about Peter, it's about all of us.
Yeah.
We all have times where we feel like we're walking on water, confident, sure of ourselves.
And then, bam, we take our eyes off of what's important and we start to sink.
Exactly. But the message is, even when we mess up, even when we lose sight of things, God is still there. He's ready to pull us back up.
That image of Jesus reaching out to Peter, it's so powerful. No matter how far we go,
Mm.
no matter how badly we think we've messed up, his love is still there.
And the storm itself, the source points this out. As soon as they're back in the boat, the storm ends. Everything's calm.
So you're saying the storm was connected to Peter's doubt, like his fear was making everything worse.
That's something to think about, isn't it? How much of what we experience is affected by what's going on inside of us?
So if we just focus on our problems, let fear and worry take over. It's like we're creating our own storms.
It's a powerful idea, and the source asks this question. What storms are you facing right now? Are you looking at the wind and the waves? Or are you keeping your eyes on the one who can calm the storm?
That's a question we should all ask ourselves, especially as we get older. Life throws a lot at us, and sometimes it feels like we're in the middle of a hurricane.
It's a reminder to focus on what's important. You know, God is there, He's powerful, and He wants to help us through whatever we're facing.
It's amazing. After everything that just happened, the disciples, they go from being absolutely terrified to, well, being in awe.
It's like they finally get it.
Right.
They see Jesus not just as someone who can do miracles, but as, well, as the Son of God.
And the source really digs into that whole Son of God thing, doesn't it? It's not just some title, it's a big deal.
Oh, yeah. Huge. I mean, in this story, and in all the source material, really, Son of God, it means Jesus is divine. He's got power over nature itself. The disciples had seen it before, but this was different.
It makes you think, doesn't it, about all the storms we go through in our own lives, especially as we get older, when we feel lost, afraid, like what's next. This story, it reminds us we're not alone in those times.
And it's not just about the actual storms, is it? It's about those storms on the inside, the worries, the fears, the things we can't figure out.
The source talks about surrendering to God's will. Like when we finally let go of trying to control everything, that's when we find peace.
It's not about giving up. It's about looking at things differently, focusing on what we can control, our attitude, how we react to the tough stuff.
Finding that calm spot inside, even when the world feels crazy.
That's so important as we get older, isn't it? We learn that we can't control everything, but we can control how we react. Do we focus on the bad stuff, or do we look for those little bits of hope?
The source ends with this really powerful image. The disciples are kneeling in front of Jesus. They're saying, "You really are the Son of God." It's like they finally believe it after all they've been through.
It's like an invitation for us, to look back on our own lives, see those times when we were rescued, when we felt God there with us in the storm, to find that awe again, even in the everyday stuff.
It's been quite a deep dive today. This story, it's powerful, isn't it, Faith? It's not about never being afraid or never having doubts. It's about finding that strength, that thing that helps us get through the tough times.
And that feeling of peace, of hope. It means even more as we get older. It's comforting, isn't it? Knowing that even when it feels like we're sinking, God's there to pull us back up.